Nearly a year after the release of the landmark report by Dalio Education, and 5 months after the start of the 119K Commission, more people than ever are aware of Connecticut's unspoken crisis. There are 119,000 young adults who are at risk or are already disconnected from school or work. But now the work is on to find solutions to reconnect them to a brighter future. Joining us today are the three members of the Commission, including co-chairs Elinor Carbone, Mayor of Torrington, and Andrew Ferguson, co-CEO of Dalio Education, as well as CCM's Executive Director and CEO, Joe DeLong, also a member of the Commission. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or member municipal leaders. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you all here. So we're here today to talk about the 119K Commission. And after months of work, at-risk and disconnected youth, we call it the unspoken crisis, and it's still, a long way to go. But we've also, over the last few months, had a lot of meetings, hundreds of people coming to them, people watching online. How does it feel to start in the right direction, at least, towards, getting something that was unnoticed or unrecognized and get it out there to actually make changes on an issue? Elinor?
This is such a great initiative on so many levels. Here on the local level, we've always known that there's a small segment of our community that are disconnected. We struggle finding ways for them to be connected to our communities. But when you look at the state as a whole, at 119,000 young people, that was mind-boggling to me. So being invited to be a part of this and recognizing that we really can make some sustainable change really was very exciting for me.
Yeah. Joe, how does it make you feel?
Well, I think first and foremost, sometimes to bring these things forward, you need a champion. And great praise to Barbara Dalio Education, who put out the original report. And say, how you put out a report? No, I mean, a report takes a lot of time, a lot of data diving, a lot of going out into communities and finding these kids where they were, because they're not necessarily in the data. They're not necessarily in a place that we normally see or track people. And so, Dalio did the really hard work, I think, of defining the crisis. And then, a lot of times people do that and then they step away and they say, we did our part. They've never stepped away. They've stayed in the game. They've given the resources to groups like CCM to be able to work with them and to continue that work. So, I agree with Mayor Carbone. I think we're out of the gates in a very positive way. But at the end, the only thing that really matters is not whether or not this was a great effort. What matters is whether or not we put these kids back on track and get them into viable, productive futures.
Yeah. Andrew, how do you feel about changing the script on this issue?
Look, I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged because of CCM's leadership, encouraged by the 12 municipal CEOs, led by Mayor Carbone and their commitment to this process. We launched in March, and we've hosted a number of regional meetings in every corner of the state, plus so many other activities. And it's required a lot of time, appropriately so. And I'm just encouraged of how the municipal CEOs have prioritized this, and how we're now starting to really surface good ideas from a lot of folks across this state, and hoping to really build momentum around action, to Joe's point.
Yeah. On an earlier episode of the podcast, when we were talking about the commission, we talked about how important it was to get a mix of voices, not just the experts, but to hear from the community, the at-risk youth themselves. There's been, these 5 meetings, including Hartford, taking place, last week, as well as multiple virtual briefings and in-person roundtables. Can you talk about what you've learned, something that maybe was unexpected that you picked up in some of these sessions? Joe?
Well, Matt, I think I'll start with your question by just, making one thing very clear from my perspective that I've learned. There are no experts on the entire challenge.
Yeah.
Because there are so many drivers that impact this population. There are experts in segments. There are experts in homelessness. There are experts in food insecurity. There are experts in mental health. But if anybody claims that they're an expert in all things that drive this population, not only in Connecticut, but nationally, I want to meet that person because we certainly have not found them.
Yeah.
So we think that we're digging into something for the first time. So the important thing is, A, that you bring in these people who are doing good work, and there's a lot of good work that's happening in segments.
Mhm.
Figure out how to pull all that good work together and produce it in scale. But at the same time, you have an understanding that you're never an expert in someone else's life. The person who's an expert in their life is that individual.
Yeah.
And so the work of this commission has been also very, very focused on going out and meeting with the people impacted by this population in a very personal, very one-on-one type of level, because you know better what you need than I know what you need for you. And so I think that's something that we are really learning along the way, is to find that balance of bringing people together, but also making sure that we recognize that the impacted population, their voices have to be elevated the most.
Yeah, it's so important. Elinor, how important are those voices to you?
Extremely important. Not only listening to the panelists who bring from their perspective, their experience, but listening to the general public that is sharing their lived experience. Listening to, they lived this, they experienced this, and they came out on the other side of it. And some of those stories are so heart-wrenching, but clearly success stories. So for my perspective, what I'm hearing is panelists who can bring a slice of their solutions or experience to the table, the public who have lived these experiences, and then trying to figure out, how do we coordinate all of these systems so that we can reduce the number of lived experiences and get to a solution or a system or policies or controls that eliminate some of those hurdles.
Yeah, as we say at CCM, collaborating for the common good.
Right.
Andrew, what's some things that have surprised you that have come out of these meetings?
I mean, some of what I'm struck by is just how many people we are still engaging with in some ways for the first time.
Yeah.
And so, Matt, to your point at the beginning, this, was and still in some ways remains an unspoken crisis, because for folks who are not with children in the system, working in the system, thinking about this every single day, there's still a big percentage of the voting base in Connecticut that this is an issue that's relatively new to them. Yeah. And I'm struck every time we're in a meeting in some corner of this state, how many people are there for the first time because they read about it, they heard about it, they watched it through Facebook. And overall, to the mayor's point, we've heard from 61 different individuals who have come out on a Tuesday night, in many cases waited 3 hours through panelist testimony to then share their experience. And I'm just struck by what people in this state have shared through this process, because it surfaces common challenges, but also a number of different solutions. And I'm struck that so many are still engaging for the first time, which gives me optimism. Optimism that there's a large number of people in this state that when they learn about this, when they see the impact on every town, that we can expand the number of folks that are supporting these issues, so there's a stronger will and stronger action to do something about it.
Yeah. And we've talked about how the support for these issues, and we've had some people that have shown up for multiple events, and some of them even lawmakers. What do you think makes this issue resonate with people so much? Joe?
Well, it's very personal. It's a very personal issue for those who experience it. And they don't have to necessarily experience it directly. They can experience the impact through someone in their family or someone they know. Maybe they don't even know anybody, but they experience the other side of it, which on the extreme can turn into, crime, or maybe they experience it not feeling as safe on their streets. So for everybody, it's very personal. I like to point out the fact in our last meeting in Hartford, we were in the city building is a beautiful building, but it's an old historic building, and the council chambers is not air conditioned.
Yeah.
And we're in July, so it's, it's a little sticky in there. And we're in this 3.5 hour meeting in a non-air conditioned council chamber where the chairs out in the audience are these solid wooden bottom, wooden hardback chairs. And we had a mother there who had her 4 young children in the audience for 3.5+ hours in that environment. First of all, kudos to those kids who were incredible and well mannered and behaved in a very difficult environment, but stayed there all that time so she could have 3 minutes at the end of the meeting to address the commission.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what that is hope. She's there because she's feeling the hope of this work, the hope that her community will be safer, the hope that there'll be more opportunities for her children because of this work, the hope that that there'll be economic advantages and there'll be a brighter future for those kids that she had sitting in there with her. And to me, when you get past all the experts and you get past everything else, and I see somebody who sits there in a hard wooden back chair in a hot council chamber for 3.5 hours to just speak to you for 3 minutes, that tells me how intensely personal that this issue is for people, and how the commission is at least resonating that maybe the product that comes out of this gives them some additional hope from prior to what they had prior.
Yeah. Yeah, talking about how it resonates with people. Mayor, have you heard back from anybody when you talk about this issue with them or at the meetings? Have you had conversations with people and gotten some of the feedback on why they're there?
Absolutely, yes. It's hard for us to leave those public forums without meeting people on our way out. They want to walk you to the car because they want to share more information and they want to be a part of the solution. They want to continue this work. Here on the local level, I've actually had a number of people from the city of Torrington attend a few of these public forums, whether it's representation from our Youth Service Bureau or a mom of 5 children who's experiencing various levels of disconnection, but as a mom fighting fiercely to keep her kids engaged, to find that next vehicle that will connect them to a job, keep them in school. And she's taken it outside her own family. She advocates for other families as a result of that. So yeah, I'm hearing on a regular basis from people about the importance of this work and the real strong desire to be a part of it.
Yeah. Andrew, obviously this all kind of started from the study that Dalio put out. What originally did you hear from people? What made you think of it in the first place to want to study this?
Yeah, and so look, I actually think that a lot of this predates the study. Just because of our role in Connecticut, we're fortunate enough to be able to support research efforts, to help raise awareness around it, to use the platform we have to share these findings broadly and widely, and for folks to listen. So we can make that contribution, but we certainly were not the first, to discover this. And really, to your question, Matt, it dates back to, look, I started my career as a school teacher in New Haven, Connecticut. I was a 5th and 6th grade teacher. The young men I taught now are in their late 20s, some early 30s. And I mean, they, to me, I'm still close with them. They're the living example in many respects of the incredible resilience within young people in this state, but also some of the barriers that they have to overcome to be successful. And so every time that we are in commission meetings, citing statistics, reading research, I think of the students that I taught and the students that I still care deeply about. And for Barbara Dalio, it started, she was a volunteer in alternative education high school in Norwalk, Connecticut. She was part of that school community because she volunteered there. She saw the needs were high, tried to understand why, and she started volunteering more than a decade ago. And for the last 10+ years, we've been deeply committed to this population because frankly, our systems aren't working for them. And so we're trying in the ways we can to stay committed to this population and to work with others who are equally committed to raise awareness, build coalition, and hopefully compel action.
Yeah. So at this point, we're kind of halfway point on the commission with one in-person meeting coming up in New London and then other meetings after that. How does the commission feel going into this second half with a few meetings left? Is there any group that you want to make an appeal that you'd like to hear from? Was there any group or individual that you might have come back? Andrew?
Well, look, I mean, it's certainly we're more than halfway through this process. So I'm
Yeah.
incredibly proud of the work done to date, the process we've all led, but also I feel a deep sense of responsibility for the work that remains unfinished.
Yeah.
Both the next few months of work, continuing to gather input, actually developing a strategy, and doing it in a way that isn't just the commission's strategy, but it's a strategy for Connecticut, one that has everyone seeing themselves in it and having a vested interest in helping to implement the strategy once it's published. So I really feel that responsibility, because I think at the whole, Joe said it well, that people have hope, but I also think that they're hungry for leadership. Like, this crisis has existed in this state for far too long. Folks that have some responsibility to lead at any level of this system, I think people are hungry for leadership, because efforts to date have not been commensurate with the extent and complexity of this crisis. What gives me personal help is what I've seen through the mayors that I've been lucky enough to serve with, right? They all represent, intentionally so, very diverse range of towns and communities across this state. Some are Republicans, some are Democrats. They all share in common, though, a deep desire to find pragmatic, nonpartisan solutions and help to elevate these solutions through their leadership.
Yeah. You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM. Joe, what are the next steps after the meeting in New London? Do we have a timeline?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea from the very beginning of this is to publish a actionable strategy sometime in early October. We still have our eye on the ball, so to speak, to get that done. So two things there. Number one, I don't think that when we publish that strategy that it is going to be, the magic wand that just solves all problems. This is a very, very complex population. And so this strategy, I think, will be measured by making a meaningful, marked difference, with the understanding that it's not the end, but the hopes of a very, very good beginning, of getting out of the gates. So I think that's important. I think the other thing, getting back to your prior question, it's nice sometimes to put a little meat on the bone in these conversations and not be too Pollyanna about all of it. And one of the things of bringing in more people, what I have personally experienced, I'm not speaking for every commissioner, but what I have personally experienced is we had some really good, people from the nonprofit community come forward and say, yes, we have a challenge and here's some things we can do to make it better. We had some really good people from the criminal justice community come forward with that same message. We had some really good people from the social services community come forward with that same message. I have been particularly disappointed to this point in time with people from the education community who have seemingly wanted to come forward and talk about all of the great work that they are doing. And I don't dismiss the fact that there are a lot of people doing a lot of great work. I can tell you that CCM, we do a lot of great work. There's 119,000 disconnected kids out there that we are losing, with another 10,000 coming on board every day. I don't think this is the right time to take this opportunity to do a victory lap on the good work we're doing. I think it's the time to come forward to say, we have a crisis and we have to do things differently. I've seen that in a lot of segments to this point in the work. I personally have not experienced that same response from the people we've brought forward from the education community. And frankly, I want to see more out of them in the back half of this process.
Yeah. Why do you think that is, Joe? Is it their interests are elsewhere?
Yeah, I think you become defensive, and you want people to know the really good things that you're doing. There are people who will have negative things to say about our organization. And my initial reaction is to push back and say, you don't know us and you don't know all the good things we do. And sometimes I take a step back and I examine that criticism and say, why do people feel that way? And can we be doing more? It doesn't downplay the good work that we do to ask the question of, is it enough? And why are we still failing in certain areas? And I don't think we have, at least with the people that we've spoken to this point, I don't think we've gotten through that barrier in the way that I would prefer that we did.
Yeah. Elinor, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I agree with Joe. I think that the challenge that we have in bringing our educators to the table is in education. I'm going to venture to say that is the single largest employer of individuals that work with young people. So, from an employment perspective, they have to be a little protective of their systems. Those touch points and challenges of managing a really well budgeted educational system is always a challenge. It's always fraught on the local level, on the state level. So I do think that comes into the conversation and creates a little bit of a barrier for us to open up that door to say, all right, so yes, we're doing all these great things. We're educating these educators to work with these young people, and yet we're still failing on some level. Let's dig down a little bit deeper and ask why. Why are we still failing some of these young people? Listen, that's the captive audience. Those are the years that we can truly make a difference in these young people's lives. So I agree when we talk about, have we teased it out enough with the educational community? I would say we haven't yet. But I also know that all of these other sectors, whether it's juvenile justice, whether it's the not-for-profits working with homelessness, housing insecurity, food insecurity, criminal justice, we also know that they also have to be at the table. It's not just about education. And changing those attitudes about letting those other sectors at the table to brainstorm some of these ideas is a challenge. It's a change. So that to me is something we do need to tease out a little bit more.
Yeah. Andrew, as the only former teacher here, what do you think the reticence of some of the educators to say there's a problem comes from? Is it just defending their own turf?
No, I mean, look, I think that there are multiple different constituencies, stakeholders within education more broadly. And so I think part of this is, trying to meet people where they are, trying to figure out from their experiences, how they can share openly and vulnerably about what has worked and also what hasn't. Because certainly when we look at the outcomes in education, it's very clear that what's worked to date, despite the valiant efforts of educators in classrooms across this state at a system level, not working. In 2023, for the first time in Connecticut's recent history, we saw the state graduation rate drop.
Yeah.
We saw 20% of kids in high school at grade 9 being off track to graduate at the end of the year. Those statistics get far worse when you break them out by race, when you break them out by income, and when you break them out by so many other indicators. And so I think part of why it's hard for folks in education to speak openly about this is because really, honestly, there's a lack of leadership to say there's a crisis in education. We're hanging banners from rafters celebrating how strong our countries and our state school systems are without acknowledging that that's not true for half of the population. For half of the population in Connecticut, our school systems are not working well. And so I think it takes leadership for folks who are doing this work every single day to feel safe, to be vulnerable in sharing about the challenges that aren't working.
Yeah. So as we've talked about, these meetings we're doing over the summer are working up towards this report from the Boston Consulting Group. How do we decide what goes into that report? Will there be recommendations in it? Let's start with Joe.
Let's quit starting with me, Matt.
Yeah, put the boss on the spot there.
Yeah, so
continue away, Matt. Continue away. Much easier.
I think that, again, this is so diverse and so broad that I think what you will find are very important categories, very important drivers of this population that we will go deeply on with some of the recommendations. I think we'll find a lot of other categories and a lot of other drivers that we will talk about, but maybe not go or dive as deep on the recommendations. That doesn't minimize the work that needs to be done there. What it does say is that we have to have focus in certain areas. We have to start somewhere, and where are the most important starting points without minimizing, other work that still must be done. So, my idea, and again, others on the commission, the work from BCG as this thing evolves, is that we are going to go to a certain point on a series of drivers that may need more examination or other people to lean in on. And then we will go very deep on another set that we think are the starting points to really start to move this population in a positive direction.
Yeah, so find those priorities and also keep those other ones there for perhaps other groups to pursue. Mayor, what do you want to make sure is in that report?
I agree with Joe. I think that the initial report has to identify and clearly identify, these are the problems that have been revealed to us through these public forums. This is the baseline data that was revealed to us through the Dalio Foundation report. And these are some of the strategies that can be implemented, actionable strategies that can be implemented with courage and conviction. But I also want this report to leave itself open enough to say, everything that we might fall on or land on as a potential strategy has to be evaluated after a certain period of time. And we have to be able to pivot and make corrections along the way. And we have to be able to continue to ask why. I am a big fan of the 5 whys. You really haven't gotten to the root of the problem until you keep asking that, but why? Why is homelessness a part of the problem here? Because once you get to that last why and you get that answer, it develops or exposes, reveals new strategies that can be incorporated. Forgive me, our fire department's been dispatched.
It's okay. Andrew, what do you hope to find in there?
I totally co-sign the mayor's 2 points about, the 5 whys, the importance of unpacking why this crisis exists. And second, the importance of using data to continually learn over time. I mean, whatever this strategy is, it will be a multi-year effort. And over time, based on what's working, we should double down on it. Based on what isn't, we should adjust. And I think that kind of learning orientation is very important. And the last thing I would add is, I want the strategy to answer the question in an honest way.
Yeah.
Right? The whole reason this commission exists, thanks to CCM's leadership, is because, we wanted to figure out what would it take? What would it take to reduce this crisis by half, to get 60,000 young people back on track while preventing others from becoming off track in the first place? What would it take?
Yeah.
This strategy should answer that question. And I think when we do answer that question, that will be a service to Connecticut, because anyone who is serious about doing something from their position in response to this crisis, the strategy will help to provide an answer for what can be done.
Yeah. Mayor, Andrew just mentioned that this process is going to take years. What are the consequences if this work stagnates? Does the problem get worse, stay the same? Why is it important that we act sooner rather than later?
Yeah, my concern is that it would get worse. You heard Joe mention that every year we see more young people coming into this disconnection. And what we're hearing out there is it's a multitude of reasons. But what you're not really weighing through these public forums is what is the impact of that to a municipality? What is the economic impact? How does that impact our workforce? Those businesses that are struggling to find people to come into the workforce. We're an aging community. We're seeing more people retire than we're seeing coming into the workforce. So from a municipal perspective, stagnation or losing ground is simply not an option for us. So there is a sense of urgency from the municipal standpoint. And I believe that this commission has embraced that.
Yeah. Andrew, the mayor mentioned some of the economic reasons behind it. Could you just briefly, for the people at home, talk about, we've talked before, about the economic impact of this?
Sure. So the cost of doing nothing, of letting this crisis continue every year, is $750 million.
Yeah.
That is what Connecticut taxpayers today are paying in the economic cost of this crisis. If we were to do something about this, if we were to help young people get back on track, connected to jobs, The economic benefit is $5.5 billion of state GDP. That's about 2% of the whole Connecticut economy. And so I think the economics is pretty clear. The other piece I think is important on the inaction question, Matt, Joe's point before about we have some hope, right? We have people who are hoping that this process actually results in something that helps them. If this process fails to help, fails to deliver on the mission, then I fear that it will be far harder the next time for people to have hope.
Yeah.
And so I think the momentum that we're building now, to me, it's a momentum that we have to continue to expand and help lead so that we drive toward action. Because if this strategy doesn't result in young people getting back on track, because so many people work hard together for a long time, I fear it will be harder to ask the next time for folks to join.
Yeah. Joe, what are the consequences of losing that momentum?
Well, I agree with Andrew, and I don't think you can minimize the consequences of losing hope. The next phase of that is trust. It's not only the stakeholders' trust in, CCM leading this initiative and so many others being a part of it, but it's the impacted population out there that we've been engaging with. And, when we sit in front of them and we hear their challenges firsthand and we go through their experiences and we do give them some hope, the worst thing that could happen with that population is then to learn that we're just another group of adults or another establishment or another bureaucracy that they could have no trust in.
Yeah.
And so I think that, it's hard to establish hope. It's probably in some ways even harder to establish trust. And it's very, very easy to break that trust. And once you break it, it's nearly impossible to get it back. And so I think that we have to be very honest stewards of this work. And I think that the people that we're trying to work with and bring along in the process and hear and learn from, we have to continue to establish that trust with them to be successful, not just in the short term, but certainly in the long term.
Yeah. Andrew, how do we ensure that people feel that the process is moving along and fair if they've seen similar things or similarly intentioned things fail in the past?
Yeah, I mean, look, part of it is simply that our actions match our words, and we continue to repeat that with integrity. And so what we've said all along when we announced this commission with CCM in March is it would be a very open, public, and inclusive process. We would have multiple inputs to the process. And we've put out 8 different ways that anyone who's interested can contribute their ideas and engage in this process. And so if you want to show up on a Tuesday night, come to a regional forum, hopefully one in your community. If that's hard, you can submit testimony online through 119kcommission.org. If you're a young person, we're actually going to come to you as we have in Stamford and Waterbury and other communities in the coming weeks, right? If you're someone in a community by which one of your mayors is on this commission, mayors are hosting local forums to hear directly from providers in their community. And there's so many other ways that this commission has really tried to create an open and inclusive process that meets people where they are across this state. And we've done that. And Matt, to your question, what's going to get in the strategy? One answer is what gets in this strategy has been what has been surfaced through this process. In other words, nothing will be in the strategy that hasn't come through one step of this 8-part strategy development process. And I think that's important because, our words have matched our actions and our actions are words.
Yeah. And if people at home want to get involved, 119kcommission.org is the place to go to get information on that. Right. We started the show asking how it felt to flip the script, take something, the crisis, and try to bring attention to it. What gives you hope for the future? Do you think that we as a state can reach the ultimate goal of reconnecting these 60,000 kids, that half the population in the next few years? Elinor?
Yeah, I have tremendous hope that we can do this because we know that, this work that we've undertaken, the report that we plan to generate, and the strategies we hope can be implemented, we know that they're going to impact individuals. I said it in the beginning when we first embarked on this journey. We know that it may require policy change. We know that it may require some budget commitment, but we absolutely know that it is going to take people working for people, working with people. So I am very hopeful, and I do believe that not only will these strategies be able to be adopted statewide, but I'm hoping that every mayor and all 169 municipalities can take a piece of this and implement it within their own borders.
Yeah. Andrew, do you think we have the tools and resources available to make these changes?
Yes, yes, yes. And that's in part why I'm hopeful. You know,
Yeah.
it's not that we're doing some sort of physics or something where the actual answer and evidence base is beyond us.
Yeah.
We're doing things where we generally know what works as a community. The question is whether we're going to work together. And so it's about how we work together, whether we have the will to work together and to stick it out, you know, whether we have the will to learn and adjust and pivot along the way, whether we have the will to prioritize this issue among others.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you know, in my heart of hearts, I think we do, because this crisis, it's about our kids. It's about the friends of our kids. It's about the kid who might be a teacher now, right? There's a direct connection or there's a second order connection. It's very personal. And I think that's why at the end of the day, folks are going to work together around addressing this. And I'm very hopeful that they will.
Yeah. Joe, what gives you hope that we can pull this off? I mean, obviously you got CCM involved with this, so you feel like we can do it, or else you wouldn't have started. So what gives you that hope?
Well, I think a lot of it is a common mission, a common goal. You know, when you talk about kids, you know, I have kids, and I can tell you that my kids are involved in extracurricular things and sports. And, you know, when I go to one of my kids' sporting matches and I sit there with all of the parents and we're rooting on our kids, I could care less at that point in time whether they're voting for Trump or Biden. It means nothing to me in that environment. I could care less if they're pro-business or pro-labor. It means nothing to me in that environment. The one place where we can sometimes set our ideological differences aside and come together with a common goal is helping our kids and moving them forward into bright, positive futures. And oh, by the way, when we do that, it helps us too. Andrew talked about the economic advantages. So we can talk about all the moral and social reasons why we have to tackle this crisis. But honestly, there's also a very compelling economic driver for every single connected, not disconnected, for every single connected, successful person in the state of Connecticut. Your quality of life, the economic impacts, all of those things improve when we help these children.
Yeah.
So are these young people, young adults, whatever the case may be. And that is so vitally important. That's what makes me think we can be successful, because it is going to take broad coalitions of what in other areas may be what we would consider to be unlikely partners.
Yeah.
You know, but they're not unlikely partners when it comes to this challenge, this crisis. We're all collectively in it together. And I think that is one of the things that really allows us to create a framework for success. Because in many ways, despite all of our differences or what all of our individual focuses are, in this case, we're a bunch of parents coming together at a sporting event to root on our team. So I think that's why we can be successful if we continue to pull the boat in that direction.
Yeah. No matter what else is going on out there, everyone loves their kids and wants them to succeed and do better. And as you mentioned, even for people that don't have kids, they can see the economic arguments. It's a lot of people can come together on this without there being too much controversy about it, I guess. Well, thank you all for joining us today on the Municipal Voice. We certainly appreciate it. Looking forward to this New London meeting coming up at the end of the month. Any final words, Andrew?
Simply two things. One, we want you to engage if you've yet to engage. Two concrete ways to do it. You mentioned, Matt, at the end of this month, I think it's August 27th, that Tuesday, if I have my date correct, 5:30, New London City Hall. Please come in person if you could to participate in that meeting through public comment. We're going to focus on workforce development, ways to help connect young adults to the workforce at a time when we have over 100,000 unfilled jobs. If you can't come to New London at the end of August, you can watch us online through CCM's Facebook page. And second is testimony. If you have an idea, we want to hear it. And so please go to 119kcommission.org. You can click on the button that says connect in the top right corner and share your ideas. We read them all. We post them as well. And we want to hear from you, certainly by the end of August.
Joe, anything to close us out?
No, I think that Andrew said it well. Follow us, engage with us. Most importantly, probably of all of these things, when a strategy comes out in October, join us in the very hard work of the implementation. We need a lot of partners, a lot of people to join us in the fight of implementing this strategy toward its greatest success.
Great. Mayor, any final thoughts?
Just to expand on both Joe and Andrew's comments, we worked very hard to give these young people a voice. And we certainly want to do everything we can to listen to what is being and to continue to carry that message forward. So this work and the continued support of the community to implementation is really critical.
Yeah. Great. Well, Elinor, Andrew, and Joe, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the 119K Commission and all the great work we've been doing and are going to continue to do into the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
We'd like to thank our guests, Elinor Carbone, Andrew Ferguson, and Joe DeLong. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws us on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like. And watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page.